Now, following on from Dan's account of the Soul Conference, I think it was in March this year, my mandate today is to share with you yet another biblical reflection, one that we believe has profound and significant implications for the church's mission with children. Our context is the city of Philippi. So travel with me, if you will. It's a riveting account of Paul's missionary journey, which we find in the book of Acts, chapter 16. Paul moves on to, I think I'm going to work that myself. So let's just take this back one more. I just want to take us back to this context. I think it's important. Right to the first slide, please. So, the city of Philippi. Everybody here familiar with Alexander the Great? Now, this city is named after Alexander the Great's father, Philip of Macedon. After discovering its economic and strategic value, Philip conquers the city and names it after himself. In current days, it is considered one of the most noteworthy archaeological sites in eastern Macedonia. Fascinating account, this chapter, Acts chapter 16, of the establishment of the church in Europe. Now, we must remember that this was a perilous time for the early Christian movement. Christians were seen to be troublemakers and seen to be in flagrant disregard of Roman gods and goddesses. And these were very, very hazardous times for those early Christians. Now, the text I'd like us to zero in on is the vision that Paul receives. It's a man from Macedonia saying, "Come and help us. Come to Macedonia," as seen in this mosaic. So, Paul, attributing this vision to the call of God, heads over to the region. He gets into Philippi and meets Lydia. Remember this story? Lydia, the rich businesswoman. And she responds favorably to this message, and she and her entire household are saved and subsequently baptized. So Paul, who is accompanied by Silas, continues to stay on in Philippi and continues their ministry in this fascinating city. This is where things start to get very intriguing. Staying on in Philippi, they encounter a slave girl. Now, this is a dramatic collision with this very fascinating girl. This girl is possessed by the spirit of divination, which means she is able to read people's fortunes. Now, what do we know about this girl? The text tells us that the girl is a slave. Her owners benefit economically by this spirit that she has. And we are told by Luke that this is a spirit of Python. And Python was apparently the spirit that was supposed to protect the oracle of Delphi, according to Greek mythology. So, this girl is possessed by the spirit, and when she observes Paul and Silas, she begins to scream out, and she says, according to the scripture, "These men are the servants of the Most High God. They proclaim to us the way of salvation." And she continues to scream out, "These men are the servants of the Most High God. They proclaim to us a way of salvation." And every day, as Paul and Silas are trying to quietly go about their mission work, because remember, these are perilous times for the early Christians, this girl is out there screaming out, "These men are the servants of the Most High God, and they proclaim to us a way of salvation." Now, Paul, not known for his finesse or compassion, becomes highly agitated by this girl, and annoyed. Some versions say he's annoyed by this girl. And so, at one point, just thinks, why can't she just be quiet already? There's something wrong here. There's something wrong with this witness. what's wrong with this witness? Now, I'd like to submit to you that this witness lacked credibility. How was she to truly know about this salvation if she was being manipulated by this evil spirit? How was she to truly know? Has she tasted of the fruit of salvation? No. She was being manipulated by the spirit of divination. So her witness lacked integrity. It was an important truth, but it was serving an illicit and dubious purpose because of its link with paganism and the occult. Now, if we think that integrity is the state of being complete or undivided, let's for a moment scrutinize this girl's witness. Her discourse, what she said, did not link with her consciousness, what she thought, with her action, what she did. There was a disconnect between the discourse, consciousness, and action. And therefore, there was a lack of integrity in her witness. And for this reason, this witness was neither accepted or needed. And what we see next is the wonderful deliverance of the girl from this evil spirit. Now, tragically, we never hear of the girl again, but this set upon a series of very significant events in the missionary journey of Paul and Silas. When the owners discover that their business asset, who was able to make them a huge profit, was no longer capable of doing the fortune telling, they became very angry. Naturally, their hope of profit was gone, and this made them very, very angry. So, they decided to trump up some charges against Paul and Silas. What were these charges? Firstly, they were upsetting and disturbing the city. I'm wondering if we have any people here who upset and disturb their cities. Secondly, they were accused of advocating Jewish customs, and this was unacceptable. So, who were her accusers? Who were their accusers? They were the owners, whose economic profit was suddenly taken away. And then we have the mindless crowds who join in the attack on Paul and Silas, and they join in unified opposition. And in South Africa, we would say this is tantamount to a xenophobic attack on the two. So, what then was the punishment? They were stripped. They were severely flogged, seriously enough to cause open wounds. And because they were considered low status, presumed by accusation alone to be guilty, they were thrown into the innermost cells of the prison, the cells that were reserved for the most dangerous felons. And upon being thrown into these cells, they were kept under vigilant watch and their feet firmly strapped in. So, this is where things start to heat up and the pace of the chapter picks up. Here is the most famous scriptures preached around the world. Remember the jailhouse rock? Anybody here? This is a sermon preached around the world. When things get hard, when you feel like your back's up against the wall, when your hands are tied, when things are really, really bad, what do? Praise Him. Praise, sing, worship, and everything is going to be okay. But again, my submission to you, ladies and gentlemen, is this really all the text is about? I fear that if we take this text out of context, we would be robbing it of its richness. We must remember why Paul and Silas ended up in prison. Why did they end up in prison? It is because they dared to touch the profit margin of those owners who had used that girl. And so they end up being treated as dangerous felons, beaten and trapped in this prison. And that's when, after praising and worshiping, there's a mighty deliverance, and they are set free from their captivity. We remember the story of the jailer who is terrified that they would escape and he would be blamed, and he subsequently, together with his family, is saved. And so the story continues. The magistrates say, okay, we've heard about this, just please, you two, go in peace already. I can imagine them telling us, once this conference is over, you people from the 414 conference, just go in peace. They want to get rid of us. And so they did the same with Paul and Silas. But Paul and Silas refused to go in peace. They said, hold on here. There's a massive miscarriage of justice. You have publicly humiliated us. You have publicly assaulted us. The violence against us was completely unwarranted. We were not tried. We were just found guilty and thrown into your inner cells. And now you want us to go quietly? I find this fascinating. Quite a far cry from the meek, mild, gentle Christianity. This is a Christianity that is concerned with justice. A Christianity that is concerned with justice and not just mercy. So, the injustice cannot be overlooked. The injustice perpetuated against them cannot be overlooked. They refused to go quietly, and they demanded that justice be met. So what then can we say are the missiological implications of this very critical text? Well, the first thing I gain from this text is that the mission with and to children is the mission of God. This is God's mission, as in the call from the man from Macedonia. We have to wait for the guidance and the leading of God as to planning our itineraries and our plans. I know lots and lots of mission organizations are in 2014 planning season. But has this planning truly heard from God? Is God leading? Is God guiding the next steps of our missionary journeys? Secondly, as in this story, the story of the church in those early days was a story established in pain, in blood, in humiliation, in obstruction, and in trouble. What can we say of the story of the 21st century church? Is it a story of opulence, grandeur, celebrity? Or is it a story rooted in pain and suffering? A story of encountering and crossing over boundaries, getting out of comfort zones, and a story of the liberation of the captive. Because there is no liberation of captive if we are in our comfort zones. What is the story of the 21st century church? If the good news is that Jesus died to set us free, who exactly is being set free through our mission and our ministries? Is it just more freedom for ourselves? Thank God I'm free. Or are we liberating the captivities of the children in our cities and our nations? Because I tell you now, the liberation of the children in our nations, in your nation and in my nation, is going to take nothing short of blood and tears and suffering. This story of Christianity in the early church is not a story of subdued faith, but a story of faith in action. If mission is the activist streak of the church, if those who participate in the mission of the triune God, if we believe that we refuse to accept the world as it is, and we want to see the kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, this will mean that we understand not only mercy, but justice. In addition to these implications, I believe there's yet another implication that we must seriously consider. When we look at the witness integrity of the slave girl, it brings to my mind the manipulation of children to engage in evangelism. Now, this is a hot potato issue. It is a very, very hotly contested issue that needs our serious consideration. And I'd like to submit to you that children must never be manipulated into becoming witnesses. The spirit of Python described in this particular chapter is being discussed by some commentaries as being linked to ventriloquism, puppeteering. We dare not render children into puppets by manipulating them to become witnesses. Because if we do so, then we are saying that God is not able to work authentically within the child. And we know that that is not true. God is able to work authentically within the child. Adults are not the sole custodians of the good news of Jesus Christ. Children around the world bear this good news and authentically can bear witness to this good news. So there is no need for our manipulation of children in this regard. God is perfectly able to work within a child, and a child is perfectly able to respond to the call of God without the manipulation of adults. Now, if you've had the chance to walk around the streets of Bangkok, what you would see is the humanity and the divine value of the child being robbed, brought down to mere flesh and sold to any bidder that may walk by. This is the world that we live in. This is the city that this conference is being hosted in. What will we now do? Will we continue to behave as though these things do not exist? We are the righteous, we are the holy. We do not even look at these things. These things are too sinful for us. Have you seen these girls in prostitution, these whores? But what brought them there? My final submission to you is that we lack the taste for suffering, the 21st century church. We lack the taste for justice, this 21st century church. And that's what keeps these children on the streets and in bondage. And so, there is a war against children the world over. And this war rages on across the continents in different forms in our cities. And as church, what is the meaning of the good news while this war rages on? There is a complex reality that we all need to consider. In the same way the girl was in bondage, we need to establish what are the systems and the structures that perpetuate the bondage of our children in our nations. I'd like us all to consider who are the slave owners in our cities and in our countries. Who are the masters and how are they gaining economically? Who are the missionaries? How are they being called? Are they directing their own path? Or are they hearing from God? Are they daring to encounter the different, the unknown, the daunting? Are they daring to sacrifice? Are they daring to cross over and to liberate the children that are in bondage and that are being oppressed? And so there's a whole series of reflections. What are the possible costs in engaging in this mission with and to children? Because I tell you, there is a cost. And it is a cost that we must rise up to pay. In your community, who will stand? In your church, who will rise up? And so these were just some of the reflections of the Soul Conference with particular regard to the Acts chapter 16 text. Calling you all to a conference of this nature is calling you with a great expectation. It is not so that you can just take another conference for the 2013 conference circuit. It is to say, with great responsibility, that the church has been called to such a time as this, in a time of great evil. How will we respond to this call? How will we respond to the spiritual and material oppression of children across the world? I do not stand here to become sensational or to just raise your emotions for a few moments. I am pleading with you. For how much longer will we allow this? If we say we believe in the good news of Jesus Christ, if we say we carry with us the liberating presence of the Most High God, how much longer? This mission with children, what does it mean in the context of the 21st century?